Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others aspiring to be them can follow in their footsteps.
Okay, good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of Latte with Lawyer. I'm your host, Jonathan Brickman. Today we have a really interesting guest here from McAlpin and Friedman, Ken Fox, who is a attorney representing healthcare providers. And welcome to the show, Ken.
Hi, good morning. How you doing?
Good. Excellent. Thanks for joining us today. So listen, just to kick off the show, to keep with the theme, tell me, how do you get started in the morning? What's your favorite morning beverage?
Well, how I get started is not necessarily my favorite morning beverage. Unfortunately, I've got to get up in the morning and grab a Keurig, which is not the best coffee in the world, but it gets two of the kids out of the house. But if then we can jump in the car. I'll go with my wife. We'll head up to Starbucks and I'll grab an Americano, which I sort of got hooked on because I kept going in for dark roast and they kept saying we're not doing dark roast in the afternoon. So, went from $2.50 a cup to $4 a cup.
Oh boy,
definitely worth it.
Well, that's a strong cup of coffee too. I've had I can't drink the coffee if it's too strong. Americano isn't that the strongest you can get?
Well, it's basically I'd have like 4 shots of espresso with water and just a touch of cream, a couple of Splenda in there.
Oh boy. Okay. And how many of those a day do you need?
I usually only have one of those a day,
All right.
and then another, cup of regular or two, depending on how the day is going.
All right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, you're in a challenging industry there, so I'm sure you need to be alert and awake. So that makes sense.
Yeah, if only we could convince the judges to let us have coffee in the courthouse.
That may be scary. I'm not sure. So listen. So tell us about yourself and what kind of work you do. And
so, my firm and what I do, or what I was doing, was primarily medical malpractice defense. I've actually been at the same firm since law school. So I came out of law school in '96, got the job at the firm, and have been there ever since.
Wow.
We primarily represent hospitals and doctors in malpractice cases. And that's what I did for most of my 25 years. Most recently, probably about two or 3 years ago, one of my clients, or one of the partners, was basically running an insurance program for a national healthcare provider. When I was a junior associate, he brought me onto the account. And as he was getting closer to retirement, we kind of segued into a transition, and the insurance carrier decided to let me take on his role when he retired. So from, litigating malpractice cases for most of those years, I went to more of a risk management role, and branched out a little from malpractice into employment, some D&O, and a touch of cyber, but I try and avoid that.
Okay. Why avoid that?
You stick with what you know.
Yeah.
So it's easier to retain counsel and keep an eye on them. But it's a lot of active risk management, which is nice, as opposed to litigation, which can be reactive or can be occurring years later. You really get a sense of that you're doing good when you have a client calling up saying, we have this situation going on now with this patient or with this employee. What do we do? Or how do we handle it? And, it's a lot more active and extremely fulfilling.
That's interesting. I mean, and in some ways it's a lot like cyber defense, right? So it's risk management, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the cyber stuff, I've just touched on it a bit, and it's really just more, monitoring counsel. But, with all the ransomware that's out there and looking at the insurance issues that are involved in that, it's really scary, just trying to get your companies covered and what needs to be done to get those companies covered under those policies, all the steps you need to take on your internal IT security, which, it can be really expensive depending upon on your firm.
Yeah. What's the biggest risk you're trying to prevent with medical mal?
And med mal, I mean, obviously, you know, you mean in a cyber, just in med mal regularly?
Yeah,
In med mal,
just with med mal.
and it's really patient safety. You know, that's the paramount concern I have whenever I'm dealing with my clients is there's what's right, what's wrong, but what are we doing to keep this patient safe? Why, if there's been a complication, okay, we can go into why the complication occurred afterwards. What are we doing now to make sure that that patient is getting adequate care to avoid them getting damaged or getting damaged any further? Obviously the worst case scenarios are death or paralysis, some type of, traumatic brain injury. But it could also be, real simple stuff. Just you have someone who's upset about service and is acting out in a waiting room, and that's having an effect on other patients who are waiting as well. So there's that customer service aspect. But obviously the biggest thing that's paramount is patient safety. I put that above everything else.
Got it. Well, listen, I mean, obviously we live in a pretty litigious world here. And I mean, things don't always go right, or maybe the outcome is not what the patient thought. I mean, so I would imagine, you're trying to manage that all the time, right?
Yeah, well, you're always trying to manage that. So, whenever I'm litigating a case, irrespective of whether or not I think my clients did right or wrong, or whether there was, some type of, departure from the standard of care or negligence, most of the time, the person sitting across from me at a deposition or who my client was wronged and was harmed. Whether we did something wrong that harmed them is a complete other story. But I think, it's very important to show empathy towards the other side.
Yeah.
You want to, I think it's human nature. And look, something bad happened to someone. It doesn't mean I'm going to pay you any money. And it doesn't mean that you're entitled to any money, but by the same token, I'm a human, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I care about people. So I'm going to show you the level of respect you deserve, and I'm going to, express empathy towards you that you deserve. But I'm also going to zealously defend my client if they didn't do anything wrong.
Right. Well, you have a very aggressive plaintiff attorney on the other side, right? That's obviously trying to get damages for their client.
Yeah, but fortunately, or at least in New York, for the most part, what I've discovered and what I've come across is it's a small community, even though there's tons of cases. And there's a mutual respect amongst a lot of members of both sides of the bar, because we're doing this with each other on a regular basis. It's not, I'm going to have one case with you and I'm never going to see you again.
Right.
There are firms I can have, 5, 10, 15 cases with, and we have to learn how to trust each other for the most part. I mean, there are some attorneys I can do handshake deals with. And there are other attorneys that, you got to make sure everything's in writing. But for the most part, I'm going to treat them how they're going to treat me. And what I've found is that's how I get good results. And that's how, you make the day go by better, make the litigation easier for your client. If the temperature in the room is not elevated too high for no reason or no whatsoever other than someone's ego.
Right. Got it. How often do you find yourself in the courtroom as opposed to settling?
Very few cases are tried nowadays.
Okay.
And especially with my current practice, I'm not really trying much of anything.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of ADR, especially with COVID. I found that, everything gets pushed to ADR. And now that, I'm doing work outside of New York where I've got local counsel, but, getting thrown into mediations, you're seeing how there's a lot of big pushes to get things out of the courthouse.
Okay.
So I have 2 mediations next week. I have a few weeks after that. Was in one, last week, and another one a couple of weeks ago. A lot of ADR, because people don't want to wait for the money. Insurance carriers and clients don't want to incur excess defense costs if they know at the end of the day they're likely going to wind up resolving it anyway.
Are you preparing as if you're going to court? You're always preparing?
You can't get a good settlement unless you assume you're trying the case.
Okay.
You need to prepare for trial. You need to assume that everything's going to blow up and you're going to have to try the case.
Okay. Okay.
Because otherwise you're never going to be able to settle it. And you're never going to be able to settle it for the right number.
Got it. So that's interesting. I mean, that's consistent with what I hear. So how do you do that? What's your approach to prepare for a case?
It depends on the case. It's doing the in-depth research on the other side, both counsel and the patient or the plaintiff. It's getting all of the relevant discovery and doing deep dives on that, not just reading it, but seeing where that discovery takes you. Making sure you've got your experts lined up. If I've got a case that I know it's going to settle. Well, if I don't get those experts lined up, what if it doesn't settle? And then, I'm looking at coming up at a deadline and I don't have any experts.
Got it.
That's one of the biggest things we do is get experts and get them early.
Always get experts in all your cases typically?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say 99%.
Oh, interesting. And this, and for a similar case, using the same expert over and over again?
We have, repeat experts we like to use.
Sure.
It's interesting. On the one hand, you'll say someone's testified so many times that, their credibility is subject to attack. On the other hand, if they're a successful expert and they've done it a dozen times, there's a reason. It's because they're able to convey that story to the jury.
Okay.
And if they've had successful results, it's because juries like them.
Got it.
So,
so stay with that for a minute. When you say the jury liked them, they've been able to convey that story. How do you define that? Like, what does that mean?
They're sitting there on the stand and the jury is rapt, listening every word, leaning forward that's coming out of their mouth. I remember there was this one expert, and he's passed away, but I was a young associate and I was meeting him with a more senior attorney. And you met him, and the second you met him, you could tell why juries loved him. It was like, here's grandpa, I'm going to tell you a story, come sit in my lap. That was the kind of presence he had. And he testified, dozens and dozens of times, but always with great results because he had that instant, attachment and rapport with the jury.
Interesting. Okay. So it was, would you say it was like this emotional connection with the jury?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, and I've been, I've been with a lot of my clients throughout the years, and you can tell who a jury's going to like and who a jury's going to have some issues with. And same thing on the other side, because, we can focus on evidence and we can focus on proof, but likability is going to factor into jury awards and jury verdicts as well. It's going to, have an impact on the witness's credibility, that likability factor.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Very interesting.
I mean, I've had clients who have very poor credentials, but they're really likable. And, you walk out of their deposition and you're getting a call from the plaintiff's attorney saying, my case isn't so good. Can we do something? And, then I've had super qualified doctors, people that like, if I've got this disease, I want to go to this person, but they can't make that communication. They can't make that connection. And it becomes problematic.
So how do you prepare for that? So let's say you have somebody that is super qualified, but isn't a good communicator. How do you mitigate the risk with that?
Practice.
Okay.
You try, and there are actually, witness preparation specialists that we will sometimes use to bring in to really work on that client's ability to testify and get their story out. That's the biggest thing. It's just got to be, clients who know that if you're going to be successful, you've got to put in the time and you've got to be open-minded and listen to instruction and do your best to follow it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, good. Let me ask you just to pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Is there one case that sort of stands out for you that you worked on?
There aren't.
Wow. Okay.
I've worked on so many cases. And the great thing about medical malpractice defense is almost every case is super interesting.
Mm.
You know, the medicine that's involved is super technical. You'll spend more time in medical textbooks than you will in the law books. And, you know, they're just really, really interesting cases. And the clients are, you know, really great to work with. You're often dealing with extremely bright clients.
Yep.
A lot are very successful. Some are very high profile. You know, you could be representing a physician who's, you know, has TV appearances or is, you know, one of the leaders in their field worldwide. And then other times you could be representing someone who's just got a little private practice. And it's you know, it's just wide ranging, and just the stuff you see between the heart surgery cases, the obstetrical cases, the neurosurgery cases, orthopedics.
So you're covering the whole range. It's not just
Yeah.
one. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can spend my morning working on a heart surgery gone bad, then spend the afternoon on a delivery case, and then a pediatric surgery case and an orthopedics case. So it's really, you get this wide ranging knowledge of medicine that's really goes beyond, you know, what you ever thought was imaginable. And, you know, it's kind of interesting when you bring in new associates. I always have this speech I give to them that says, don't yes me if I'm talking to you in a language you don't understand. You didn't go to medical school.
Right.
You need to tell me that you don't understand a word I'm saying. Because if I talk to someone who's been doing this for 20 years, we've developed a certain knowledge base and a certain level of sophistication with this stuff, because we have to be able to communicate with our clients.
Sure.
We have to understand what our clients are saying. We also have to make sure our clients are, you know, being straight with us. And we also have to make sure the other side understands it. So it's, you tend to forget, not that you're talking over the younger associates, you're just so used to talking in a language that they may not understand. So.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Listen, my dad was an orthopedic surgeon, so I knew enough I knew enough about what he was doing that I could have a conversation. But you're right. There's so much, you know, in medicine, there's a lot of vernacular. There's a lot of concepts that the average person just doesn't understand.
Yeah, it's good stuff, you know. So there's not like this one thing that sticks out.
Interesting. So how'd you get started? Like, why'd you decide to become a lawyer?
So, you know, I was in college, and I actually student taught, because I was thinking of going into education and coaching. Because
you went to Tufts, right? You went to
Yeah.
Tufts. So why'd you pick Tufts? Actually, I was curious.
So it's a great school. I also had a father who went there, had a brother who went there, and a sister who went there. So it was kind of like, they were like, don't go to Tufts, go, you know, I remember I got into Carnegie Mellon, and my parents were like, go to Carnegie Mellon.
I went to Carnegie Mellon. That's so funny. I mean, I grew up in Boston. I grew up right next to Tufts, and my dad, same thing. He literally forced me to go to Carnegie Mellon. So that's interesting.
Yeah, because I was the youngest child. My parents were like, why don't one of our kids go somewhere else?
Yep.
So I said, no, I'm going to go to Tufts too. And I ran there, and I used to lifeguard down at the pool, and, you know, I had met one of the trustees who was very active at the ECAC, and I was thinking of maybe going into sports information. And then I was thinking about maybe teaching, because that way I could still coach. And then I student taught for a semester, and I hated it. I said, you know what? I've always been active and involved in politics.
Yep.
You know, I did model Congress in high school. I was on in college, I was on this judicial committee where we handled appellate decisions from the dean of students. So I said, you know what, I'll go to law school. My father was an attorney.
Okay.
I applied, and I loved it. And then, you know, as far as getting into med mal, I was an EMT in college. And I was sort of like, do I want to go into corporate law? Do I want to go into, you know, tort litigation? And I spent like one summer actually interning 3 days a week for a med mal insurance in-house defense firm, and then 2 days a week at the NASD. And I sort of just flew into the med mal defense, and been there ever since.
Interesting. Yeah. And you said you've been with the same law firm, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't even admitted when I started, it was just, it was a great place to work. Treated me well, not just professionally, but personally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been there over 25 years.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's unusual, right? Well, maybe more in legal profession, you stay with the same firm, become a partner, and stay with the same firm. But right, people nowadays jump from one place to another.
Yeah, a lot of jump. It's a much different mindset, I think, with the younger generations. When I came out of school, you would find your firm. If it wasn't a good fit, then you would go to another firm, and there was jumping around. But if you found a good fit where you could find yourself on a partnership track, you would stay.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So good. So you're leading me into my next question, which is, again, so if someone's getting started out, what would your advice be today? And what do you think makes a successful attorney?
What makes a successful attorney is you've got to like what you're doing. So many people, especially when the economies are bad, they're going to continue to go to grad school, go to law school. And a law degree is great because it just, it teaches you to think a certain way. Yeah. So it doesn't have to you don't have to just be a lawyer. But if you're going to be a lawyer, do it because you like it. Do it because you care about the type of practice you're doing. Don't always pursue the dollar versus pursuing something that you're going to enjoy getting up and doing every day. And I think that leads to zealous representation, is enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah. But I mean, someone could say, I want to be a lawyer, but how do you find, like, you happen to find med mal that you love, right, but how do you find that discipline?
It's hard. You have to be willing to look and willing to move around and willing to turn down the first thing that comes to you. I mean, I wound up at my firm when I got out of law school. The economy was not great. The job market was very poor. I think private firms were, if you weren't in the white shoe firms, the small private firms were offering you $30,000 a year. Yeah. And I got this job offer from someone, and I'm like, well, it's the only one I've got so far, but should I take it? Should I not take it?
Yeah.
And I turned it down. And then, I was actually on my honeymoon when I got the call to set the interview for my current job. And so, it's all a matter of seeing what's out there and not jumping at the first thing that's dangling in front of you. Yeah, and now there are so many research tools that we didn't have. Right. When I got out of law school, it was, not everyone had a computer. Certainly weren't cell phones. But you didn't have so much information at your fingertips to really research the places you're interviewing. You could look them up in some books, but now you can really get the information, say, is this the kind of practice I want to be in? Is this what I want to do? What are the people putting online about reviews about working there? Is there someone you can speak with? I think that's very important.
Oh yeah.
Being
everything.
And I think, from the hiring perspective, you have to be more open than you used to be. It's a completely different world, even pre-COVID, but now post-COVID, with what your associates want from you.
So talk a little bit about that. What does that mean? Like, how has that changed?
I think, you're seeing, when I started at the firm, it was be there every day of the week. We were in suits every day.
Yeah.
And it was that hierarchy, that mentality. Now, you have a whole world that's changed as far as working virtually. Associates want to have some time when they don't have to be in the office. And you have to balance that with, I've got to train you. How am I going to do that if you're not coming in 5 days? So how can we best, make you work for me, and how can I keep you happy at the same time? So, those are the kinds of things that you really have to address with associates and people that you're looking to hire is, what do they want? And is this relationship with what they want balanced with what I need going to work? And can we make that work?
Yeah.
So you need more flexibility on both sides, because there's a lot more opportunity that we're seeing for younger lawyers than there was, 20 years ago.
Got it. That's interesting. So it makes it more challenging. It's more
Yeah.
like it's more balanced, right? As opposed to the employer being in control completely.
Yeah, you're finding that there's less control,
Right.
and it's just certain things that I did as a young associate, or let me rephrase it, certain things I wouldn't dare do as a young associate,
Right.
are
Or
now
now
sort
fair
of
game.
commonplace.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word hierarchy, so I'm sort of sticking with that. You're right. So that's kind of collapsed, hasn't it? I mean, not just in the legal profession, just across
Yeah.
all business.
Yeah. It definitely has the, if you're really petrified of your boss, you go somewhere else.
Right.
That's what people do nowadays.
Well, that's good though, right? I mean, it makes
Yeah,
sense. I mean, it
different
should
some
be
positives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I always believe in collaborating and being a resource for my younger associates. What I always tell them is, you have to be able to come to me. I have to be able to come to you. I have to be able to train you and teach you and collaborate with you, because if I don't teach you, then you're no good to me.
And also, they're not becoming a good professional, a good lawyer.
Exactly. It goes both ways. If I teach you, you'll be a resource to me, but you'll also gain skills that I've acquired, throughout the years.
Yeah. The other interesting thing I think that's really changed about the workplace is that it's no longer just based on tenure and seniority. I think people realize that it's just because you did something for 30 years doesn't necessarily mean that you are more talented than somebody. People, as you kind of alluded to this with the access to information. I mean, everything's accelerated. I mean, you see people getting started much earlier, entrepreneurial ventures. You don't have to work somewhere for 30 years to be better than somebody, right?
Right. You've got to have the skills, if you're somewhere for a long time, but you haven't gone up the chain.
Right. I would imagine that's a little intimidating too, right? For people, because again, sort of that shift in power dynamic, and people are moving faster.
Yeah. People are moving faster, and there's more controls because of the ability to move around. We're also not, because of technology, you're also not as restricted as you used to be.
Right. You're making my conversation easier as I was shifting to technology. You keep giving me the words to make a segue, but right, technology. So let's talk about that for a second. Technology is everywhere. People are applying AI. They're leveraging it more. I mean, how are you guys doing that? What are your views on technology?
So, my views on technology, we're not using it as much, I would say, in the courtroom. I mean, yeah, you've got blow-ups and some stuff like that, but our cases don't necessarily lean themselves to that. But as far as, my daily practice, when I took this client over from my partner who retired, he was your classic paper tiger. Everything had to have a file. Everything had to, he would print out every email to put into a paper file. And when I started taking it over, there were certain lines of coverage that he was no longer working on, and he'd be like, "Oh, I said, I'm closing this matter. Okay, where's the file?" I go, there is no file. It's all in your computer.
Right.
And I took the client completely paperless when he retired, and he was just flabbergasted by that. So from that kind of technology standpoint, it's been amazing, just the paper reduction, the lack of files everywhere, freeing up some space. But, I think the biggest thing for me has been actually meeting people that I've known for 15 or more years that I've never seen their face.
Okay.
You have phone calls and have conference calls all the time, but, they've got people all over the country I'm dealing with. I have no idea what they look like. And now everything just through this platform.
Through Zoom, yeah.
I know these people. They know me. They know what my office looks like, what my daughter's bedroom looks like. It's been really amazing in making connections, in being able to do a lot of face-to-face stuff that you couldn't do in the past. I was negotiating a matter with someone on the West Coast, and it would have either been emails or would have been telephone calls in the past, but we did a Zoom. And the same way, sometimes if I'm negotiating a case in New York and I know the adversary friendly, will go out to, have a cup of coffee or have lunch and do it. And you can sort of do the same thing now, just, thousands of miles away.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that this existed before. You'd have conference calls or phone calls and nobody would ever turn the camera on. Now it's like, if you don't turn the camera on, people think it's kind of strange, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting how that's flipped, and now this has become the norm. All these things have accelerated because of Zoom. Excuse me, because not because of Zoom, but because of COVID, right? Things just fast forwarded.
Oh yeah. I mean, just the proliferation of this kind of stuff because of COVID,
Right.
being forced into it.
And not turning back. I mean, some of these things will persist, right? You won't go back.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
The old, yeah.
No, I mean, we started doing some in-person stuff, but you talk with some of the judges, you talk with some a lot of this is going to stay. There used to be days in you go into court in the Bronx and it'd be this one judge's med mal conference day, and you'd be in this part with 200 of your closest friends.
Yep.
And they'd go through, the couple of hundred cases on the docket. And, it'd take forever. Now it's just, okay, we're just going to click and do it.
It's amazing, right? So you're saving wear and tear in your car.
Yeah.
You're right. You're not wasting time, right?
Yeah. I mean, the flip side is though, there's a certain learning curve with younger attorneys that you get in court. And when you get exposure to working with more experienced attorneys, whether they be co-defendants, whether they be adversaries, or developing those relationships with the judges, that it's going to be more difficult to develop because of the platforms.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, I think it's a hybrid approach, right? It's not all or nothing. It's that, now I can be official with my time. So we'll still meet, but maybe we don't have to be together 5 days a week.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been, and across the board, same with our business. I mean, we've become more efficient, just because of what happened. And it's interesting. It always takes these kind of interruptions in life to sort of make a change, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us really foresaw this kind of interruption, but
Right. No, we certainly didn't. But, I think it is funny. People don't like change as a rule, right? So
especially lawyers.
Especially lawyers. Okay.
Lawyers are more immune to change than we just hate it.
Really?
We've been doing it this way forever, ever and ever.
But there's so much legal tech. I mean,
yeah,
there's a ton of technology in the space, right? And you're probably getting bombarded by it all the time.
So what's weird, I get bombarded by, people talking about it a lot and soliciting it. Our practice though, because of the nature of it, hasn't been, necessarily impacted as much as other fields. Okay. So, in most of our cases, patient goes in for surgery, something goes wrong, something happened. It's going to be what went on in that operating room. Yep. Whereas if you're dealing with like an employment situation, you may have thousands of emails you've got to go through.
Right.
So you're going to have to bring in all the e-discovery and you need to hire an outside vendor who can do that more efficiently. Thousands and thousands of emails or electronic documents. Whereas, with us, it's something happened to a person and the focus is what went on in that operating theater. So you're not necessarily going to have the same type of e-discovery issues that you would in certain other areas.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, but yeah, I'm sure you probably have, as you said, you went from paper to electronic, and you probably have case management software now and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, just, if I look at how technology was over the past 25 years, when I started at my firm, there were 3 attorneys that had computers, and we were working on, I think a WordPerfect 3.0. There was no email yet. Everything was dictated onto cassettes,
Right.
and typed, and you would, tie your cassette to the file and bring the file to the secretary. And then, a few years after that, we all got desktops and started getting email, but we really didn't have a network yet. And now it's, fast forward, 20 some odd years to multiple screens,
Right.
cameras, speakers, virtual, doing remote depositions. It's mind-boggling just how much it has gone. I mean, I remember being in law school and I had a beeper, and I was like, for one of my jobs, it's like, wow, a beeper.
Right.
And when I started at the firm, one of our clients, we had to take 24-hour call, and we would rotate it, and you had the beeper for that client. Now, like, if you use a fax machine, it's antiquated.
Exactly. I am still surprised to see fax on people's signatures. I mean, people still, you probably have one. People have fax machines still.
Well, but the thing is, we have a fax machine, we have a fax number, but it's all digital. So
Right.
there's no actual.
Oh, e-fax.
Yeah. So it's if I receive a fax, it's not coming in on paper. It's coming into a
Right.
as a PDF.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, listen, interesting. Well, this has been really, really interesting to hear your side. I mean, we talk to a lot of plaintiff lawyers, so it's always good to talk to somebody on the defense side, and particularly med mal. So if somebody wants to reach you, what's the best way if they want to learn more about your business and work with you? What's the best way to get in touch
Best
with
thing
you?
is to send me an email. At Ken Fox at mcf-esq.com. And assuming, we've got a strong enough firewall that if it's bad, they'll block it.
They'll block
So
it.
if you get through, usually means you're pretty legit.
Okay.
And starting it from there.
Okay, excellent. Well, good. So listen, this is we're going to wrap this up. This has been Ken Fox with, and I'm going to try to get it right here, with McAlpin and Friedman.
Yep.
And this show has been sponsored by EmotionTrac, and we use artificial intelligence to gather nonverbal insights that are used for mediation and trial case preparation. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.